Hello, my name is Joe Mason. I'm a doctor. I'm a country doctor. You think there aren't many of us left, but many of you find us now in strip malls working for a company like a Medicor or something, or in inner cities in an emergency room, which is where you go when you can't find health care anywhere else and need a country doctor. But that is not what I came to talk to you about today, the state of American health care. I'm going to speak to you now as a Democrat, someone who's been a Democrat all his life. My father was, and my grandfather. My grandfather was out of work when my father heard Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933 in his first inaugural address tell us that the rulers of the exchange of mankind's goods have failed. Practices of the unscrupulous money changers stand indicted in the court of public opinion, rejected by the hearts and minds of men. Now, I'd like to compare that for a moment with the inaugural address of our current president, Barack Obama. I supported Barack Obama from the very beginning. I believed in him. I placed my hopes in him. Here's what he said in what he hopes will be his first inaugural address. Our economy is badly weakened, a consequence of greed and irresponsibility on the part of some, but also our collective failure to make hard choices and prepare the nation for a new age. Mr. President, I do not believe that my patients had very much, if anything at all, to do with losing everything they had. I believe it was the people that Franklin Roosevelt had the courage to stand up and confront. President Roosevelt said the American people have not failed. He said it is pointless to deal with an economic crisis caused by bad lending to turn around and lend more money to the same people. And of course, we all remember he said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. That means that when he put Americans directly back to work without relying on money lending from Wall Street, he was not afraid of being called a socialist. When he reformed the practices of Wall Street, he was not afraid of being called an enemy of free markets or losing $500,000 campaign contributions. He was not afraid of a terrorist attack to the extent that he would then turn the national security forces loose to do anything they wanted in order to protect him from the political consequences of a terrorist attack. He was not afraid to take a stand to protect his nominees. He was not afraid to take a stand on health care. He was not afraid to take a real stand on gay issues. He's not afraid to take a real stand on the environment or on the Middle East or just about everything. In contrast, Mr. President, it feels as though you are afraid to take a position on almost anything. Can you imagine Abraham Lincoln being afraid to take a stand on the extension of slavery into new territories? Can you imagine LBJ being afraid to take a stand on civil rights, on Medicare? Can you imagine Dwight Eisenhower being afraid to take a stand to end Korea? You seem to believe that it is more noble not to take a stand than to believe in something, that those who do believe in things are somehow petty politicians wedded to their own agendas, and somehow it is more noble to be afraid to take a position than to stand for something. When you ran, you promised us change we can believe in. I think most Americans, certain Democrats, are asking themselves, what's changed in the time you have been here? And we want to know, if you run again as our nominee, what will be different. Instead of promising change we can believe in, will you promise us
more sellouts that you will force us to accept.
I believe that Bush and Cheney manipulated our fears. I fear that you have manipulated our hopes. And I fear that you will now sell out our lives, our health, and our birthright as Democrats for a little piece of pottage in the form of a tiny tax hike for Republicans and your political contributors, so you can claim a personal victory that this kind of compromise works. Republicans started a Tea Party. I believe we Democrats need a coffee party. So why am I taking it on myself, a country doctor, to talk to the country, to Democrats in particular, to the Democratic Party? I am no one of any political consequence. I'm doing it only because those Democrats of political consequence seem unwilling to ask the most fundamental question of our nominee. Do you remember the sense of pride, of hope, of exhilaration that we had set a new course for the country? Do you remember how proud we all felt on election night when that prevailed? But I want to ask you, as Democrats, as leaders of the Democratic Party, will you feel that same sense of pride now again? Mr. President, I believe if you seek the nomination of the Democratic Party again, you owe us an explanation for why, instead of putting us to work as FDR did, and you promised to do, you quoted from the song and dance of a 1930s musical and told us to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and start all over again. The explanation you owe us is why you didn't say that to Goldman Sachs, why you didn't say that to J.P. Morgan, why did you say that to AIG, why didn't you say that to Wall Street and the banks? You didn't tell them to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and start all over again. You borrowed and printed almost $1 trillion of our and our children's money and gave it to them. During the last 10 years, the working people of this country have been screwed 3 times by the alliance between the capital forces of the country and both political parties. First, by Bush and Cheney borrowing trillions of dollars to give them tax cuts. Then, by your administration, Mr. President, borrowing more hundreds of billions of dollars to make up for what they had squandered. Now, both parties are meeting to make a deal to pay back the debt again by cutting and taxing the very people who were screwed by both parties and their financial supporters to begin with. We can't let this happen to us a third time. There are many questions that you need to answer to the Democratic Party that nominated you when you ask us to nominate you again. Please don't demand that we do this. Please don't expect that we do this. Please don't presume that you are entitled to our renomination. Please explain to us why you promised that there would be less war and you have delivered us more. Please explain why you promised there would be less intrusion by the executive into the basic civil rights and privacies of our own citizens, and yet you have made every effort to increase those intrusions. I would like you to ask yourself and to explain to us why there is no clear, credible health care reform. Instead, we have, I don't know, over 1,000 pages of one great photo op. Why have you not fought for the environment, recognized climate change the way you led us to believe you would? Why, when you came in leading an historic majority of Democrats in the House, in the Senate, in governorships, in state legislatures, in the last election, was so much lost? Much of it lost, I believe, because you not only refused to accept leadership of the party that nominated you, you actually expressed, and so did your highest aides, contempt for the party that nominated you. Are you ashamed to be a Democrat? Then why seek the nomination? Are you embarrassed by the tradition of FDR and LBJ and others, so that your own chief of staff could say liberals are effing retards?
Sir, did you always know you were going to pull the biggest bait and switch in the history of the presidency?
These are the kinds of questions that I think we as Democrats should be asking you, and you should be prepared to answer. I am saddened that the Democratic Party seems unwilling to do this. Perhaps it's because you were the fulfillment of our great dream for the ultimate student body president. I don't know. That's for others to decide. But I do know that when you were offered, unwisely, the Nobel Prize, instead of humbly declining, you actually accepted a prize that you have to know you had not yet earned, and then went and made a speech advocating more war. Among your many amazing achievements, you were the editor of the Harvard Law Review. You must surely know that whatever one thinks of the military activities in Libya and the 7 or 8 other countries at least where we are bombing with drones and other means, you have to know that using a legalism to say these are not hostilities so you can avoid congressional approval is an abuse of your own legal education. And how can you allow the individual human tragedies of families torn apart with your immigration policy that you call secure communities? How can you do this and look the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, a great lawyer, in the eye at night? Why is it that you want to be the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States? I hope you will answer that question. I will leave any competition for the nomination of our party the moment someone from our party who is qualified and experienced and ready will step forward, and I pray that one will. I think right now what the country needs is to hear from you why you should be renominated. And I think I believe that right now, after our last several presidents, that much more than a lawyer, this country needs a doctor. My name is Joe Mason. I'm a country doctor. I may seek the Democratic nomination if no other Democrat will. Thank you, and pass it along.